going to finish off the last lesson where we managed to log in a user using the Google Auth API, but we are not able to wrap off registering the user and saving an entry for that user in our database. So we are going to wrap that up today. We are also going to do a bit of refractoring just to make sure our code is clean and easy to understand. So let me just jump right into it and come in here. This is where we left off. This is our auth.js, but I'm going to change these a bit. And the reason is just to get everything much more concise and clean. The first thing that I'm going to do is to rename auth to user, because this is going to contain all of the routes for user, not just for the authentication system. I'm going to come into the server and create a new folder called functions, and this is going to contain all of the functions that we are going to use. Okay, so this is from the routes we are just going to make calls to the files that are in the functions. So in here we're going to create a file called user.js, and you'll see that both our functions, models, and API folders will have basically the same file names, but the content will be different, obviously. So the first thing that we are going to do is to move everything that's inside here to our user.js. Okay, so that's really simple. I'm just going to pick up the verify accounts. I'm going to Control X that part. Let me just find one thing. Okay, and I'm going to come in here and say module.exports. Now I say equal and open brackets. Now we can start calling our function. So I'm going to paste it in here. Just Alt tab that. And now there are some differences. So instead of calling a function like this, we are going to say 2 points function, and then the parameters of that function. I'm going to remove this, and we are all set. Now we are able to call it. But as you can see, we are using all of this. So I'm going to move this inside here as well. These are all of the calls that we must make in order to access our auth system. So as you can see, our users.js is a lot cleaner now. We only need to say const user func for functions require, and now we say 2 points because we are going before that, yeah. And as you can see, VS Code actually gives us the position of the folders. Say functions, and it got out of there, user. That's right. Okay, that's it. Now coming back to our route, we are going to, instead of just saying verify account, we are going to say user func.verify account. And there are some things that are going to be different, and we'll get to that in a second. The thing that's most different is that we are going to use promises. Okay, so these promises are basically a way, because, well, this doesn't run synchronously, which means each line doesn't run automatically. So when we get to this console log, for example, it won't run right away because it must make an API call to Firebase to verify the ID token, right? And a way we can fix that is by making promises. So with a promise, it will run the code and wait until we call something that's unique to the promise. And then, only then, when that function is called, will this function end and will something return to our route.js, this post. Okay, that's the main goal of a promise. And I'll see you, and I'll show you right away how to do it. It is really simple. You just have to say return new promise, and now we just pass along resolve and reject. So anytime we finish up with this function and we want to return something to our routes API or whatever else we are calling this function, we just say resolve, for example, resolve, and then we can pass a JSON saying codes 200, saying that it was successfully resolved, right? And only when this function is called will this function end. That's basically it. So as you can see, it is really simple. Let me just close that up and move everything inside here. Okay? And that's it, basically. Now, in the user.js, we don't need to change basically anything. Let me just double check that. I don't believe we do. Then rec, oh, but yes, we do, because we don't need the rec. We just need verify accounts, and now we pass along all of the data of the user. So let's say const user equals to rec.query. Remember, this is what we pass along in the API call. So we just pass that along inside here, and inside then function callback, and then we just return the res.json callback. And we actually don't even need to return, so I'm going to remove this. But yeah, that's it. Now, if we go back to the user.js, I'm going to change how the function is called. Obviously, I'm just going to accept user, and this is so that we can accept that parameter from multiple places and not just the routes, to make it easier for us to do it. So now, saying this, we'll be able to resolve or reject the user. Okay, as simple as that. Now, of verify user, I'm also going to change this name. I'm saying user.check. And I'm sorry for making all of those changes, but I just figured it was needed to do and to organize the code before moving further ahead. Okay, now if we pick up this endpoint, we can simply come in here and change it, and it will start making API calls just as it always did. Okay, now moving on with our code and actually doing something that's relevant, we are going to start using the user model. So we are going to create an entry for the user anytime the user doesn't exist. And we already have a model that we created in a past lesson. It is really simple. It just has a name, an email, and a Google ID. This is just to keep track of the user. So now we are going to, after the user is successfully logged in, check if an ID for that user exists in the database. If it does, then we simply return the user and move on. If it doesn't, then we are going to create an entry for said user. Okay, this is really simple to do, so we can jump right into it, and everything is fine in here. So we verify the ID token, then it will be verified or not. It will just throw an error. But in here, we can simply say, we can do a query to check if the user exists. So you say user model.find one, and this will be the first query that we do in this tutorial. And this is how you do it. So you pass the model, then you say find, or if you do find, then it will get all of the users with some attributes. If you do find one, then it will just search for the first one and then send it to you. Then in the first parameter of this function, we simply pass along the attributes for which we are going to try to find the user. So in this case, we are going to search the user by the Google ID. Google ID user JSON.uid. This is the ID of the Google account that we receive from the user JSON that we parsed in here. Okay? And this is all. We say then function user. This function is going to be called when the query finishes and when Mongoose tell us if the user, if there is a user, then it will just return a user. If there isn't a user in the database, then it will be non-existent. So we say if not user, so if user doesn't exist, then we are going to create one using the data that we got from the user JSON. And to do this, it is actually really simple. You just have to create an object, a user model object in this case. Say new user model, and I believe that's how it's called. Yeah. So in here I'm going to say my user model to distinguish from the main one. My user model, and we open brackets, curly brackets, and pass the data that we want to save to the database. Remember, that data has to be coherent with the data that's inside here, so it is the name, the email, and the Google ID. So, moving on, we say name user.json user.json, I'm sorry, dot display name, and I already know the data that's returned to me, but I'll show you with the console log that this display name is in fact inside of this JSON that we sent from the API call. And if you can remember it, we are sending the information of Firebase. We just simply do firebase.off.current_user, and this will spit out all of the information that Google has on that user. Public information, obviously. We don't get to access anything else. Okay, then we say the email, for example, user.json. In this case, it is just email. And then for the Google ID, which is the one that we use for finding if the user exists. And if you want to use another authentication method, then this would have to be changed. For example, the email is also unique. You could go with that. But for now, the Google ID is more than enough because we are just using Google account. And then the Google ID, which will be user.json.uid. Okay, and this is it. Then, in order to record something to the database, it is as simple as just doing .save, and this will save a new entry in the database. But we want to know if it was successful or not. So we say then function error and user. So this will return one of two things, either the error or the user. If it returns an error, then something went wrong when saving. If it returns the user and not an error, then it means everything went just fine. Okay, and now we are going to start using the resolve and the reject function. So we say resolve, and we pass along all of the parameters that the user is going to receive or whoever is calling this function. So I'm just saying code, for example, 200, saying it is successful. I'm going to say success true. This is just to show you that you can pass along basically anything that you want. I'm going to pass along a message. Auth confirmed. User, new user created. And we can pass along the user as well, but you can put as much or as little information as you want. But if there is an error, if error, then we must do reject, right? So let's come in here and say reject code 400, success false, and instead of the user, pass along error, and the message, instead of confirm, we say denied, could not create a new user. Okay, and we can place a return in here. Even though I believe when you call reject, it will automatically close down this promise and won't continue. So this is a bit over the top, so I'm going to remove it. Okay, and so now a new user is being created. But we must do the else. So the else side is that the user already exists. I'm going just to quickly indent this correctly. If the user already exists, then we just want to return that user and be done with it. So in this if, I'm going to say else, and we're just going to say resolve code 200 of confirm existing user and user because the user is also returned in there, and that's it. It is working. It should be working just fine. Fingers crossed, as always. But yeah, that's all of it. Let me just triple check. But yeah, I believe it is all doing just fine. I'm going just to test it, and then I'll get back to you to show you the results. Okay, so the app finished loading and I managed to test it, and it is all right. I just changed one thing, which is in the login component. I changed the redirect by for pop-up. There isn't that much difference, just when you log in, a new window will pop up instead of the redirect that was before. But apart from that, it is working. Now, coming into our terminal, I'm going to I already have my MongoD running, but I'm going to do it just so that you guys can see it, to remember. So sudo MongoD. Okay, let it run. And in another terminal, simply do sudo npm run start 2.dev. Don't forget to npm install before doing that. But yeah, it compiled. And now if you come right in here and reload, the page is online, as you can see. Now I'm going to come into the terminal again, and I'm going to type mongo. Okay, this will bring us a Mongo terminal where we can do queries, we can find the objects that are currently in our database so that we can easily see what's up. I'm going to use my DB, and you can show DBS, which will show all of the DBs that you have available. For me, the one that's currently set up for this project is just called DB. So I'm going to do DB, and you can do show collections, show all of the collections that are available. So I have some from other projects, user sessions, categories, videos, users, and what we want are the users, because as you can remember, and if you come into the models, user.js, it is called user. Okay, so let's simply do db user.find, and as you can see, no user is found. Now, if you come in here and do login, and I'm going to quickly show you my authentication. As you can see, no user is in here. Yeah, let it just load. Yeah, no user is here. I'm going to sign in with Google. A window pops up. It is going to log in automatically, or at least that's what we want. And if you come back to the authentication page, my dev account should appear in here. As you can see, simcoder.dev@gmail.com is currently logged in. And if you come in here into the terminal, then yeah, a user was created. There was a dupe error because I had already created the user, but yeah, it is working. All I had to do was completely erase the database, but no worries. Now if you do, and it was users, I'm sorry, I forgot about that. That's why a dupe appeared, not user as it is in here. As you can see, the user was created with simcoder.dev@gmail.com. The Google ID is my Google ID, and the name SimpleCoder, which is the one that I use for my dev account. Okay, so it is all working as it should. Now if you come in here and log in again, you'll see that no user will be created. It will just keep on going and no problem at all will happen. In the shell, nothing changed. And if we do db_users.find, just one user will be displayed. So yeah, that's it. For the login system, we are basically done. I don't see us doing much else, at least on the part of the backend. On the front end, obviously, there's a lot to improve. We still have to include logout button, for example, which we will in the future. Now, that's not a worry. So in the next lessons, we'll learn how we can create listings for the user, posts, better yet. How we can associate those posts with an user, which is basically the same thing as with Firebase, if you remember the previous projects. And yeah, it should be pretty straightforward. So thank you guys so very much for watching. I hope to see you again tomorrow, and ciao.